All right. So,
Um,
Patrick. Okay. So we're having a little bit of difficulty. This is Haiti Oropes at 6:08. We are live, and good evening. We have Patrick Mantiega from La Gaceta with us this evening, and so we're gonna try to do this the best that we can. Because an issue came up now here with the audio where I'm getting a lot of echoing. So we're going to try to do this as gracefully and smoothly as possible. Patrick Montega, the editor and publisher of La Gaceta, on May 6th edition this year, he wrote a column, and it was he it was hard hitting in regards to the current program, crime free program in Tampa, that's being investigated by the federal government, the DOJ, to see if there were any civil rights violations occurring, in regards to housing. As soon as I read it, I thought, wow. And he graciously this past week gave me an excerpt of, as we heard it. If you don't subscribe to La Gaceta, the publication, the monthly subscription, which I receive right to my post office box, as we heard it, is if you want to be in the know as to local politics here in the Tampa Bay area, it's a must read. Welcome, Patrick. You could go ahead and unmute yourself.
unmute yourself.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's great.
I can't talk while he's unmuted. So okay, so let's talk about the excerpt of your May 6th, as we heard it, column. Um, you start by talking about Creative Loafing's headline.
Yeah, so Creative Loafing, Creative Loafing did a great. Has been doing a great job on the mayor, and pointing out that she has not did not disclose the fact that we had a investigation ongoing in the city of Tampa by the Justice Department regarding police policy and calling up landlords of people who've been arrested and informing them of what they were arrested for. And it's led to a lot of people losing their apartments. Some of these people who've been called on, the landlords, they weren't even living there. They were just family members. And it really has been focused on the Black community. And so, we took it a step further than they did. And our mayor's had a problem with arresting Black protesters during Black Lives Matters issue. She had biking while Black. And so it's a combination of renting while Black, biking while Black, protesting while Black. But if you're Black, you're getting too much scrutiny by the Tampa Police Department, and they all link back to this mayor.
Okay, so do we hear any echoing now? Because you're not muted. Okay, so you're muted, Patrick. Okay, so I'm pretty prepared for this tonight. And Patrick, you're a hard-hitting journalist. You really are. You pull no punches. So I'm gonna straight up ask you, do you think Mayor Castor is a racist?
I think Mayor Castor doesn't focus on what she's doing. I think that a lot of times she's thinking she's doing it right, but she doesn't seem to be having any sensitivity towards the Black community or into looking at the people she's actually going after. At some point, while I wouldn't call her racist, I would say that at some point, there's something wrong with you if you keep doing the same mistake over and over again. And she continues to be very abusive to the Black community, and I won't comment on what's causing that, other than to say that she should know better by now.
Okay, so that's fair. You're not saying she's a racist, but your column did say that the programs are racist, and at least they're having a racist effect. Yes?
Yes.
Absolutely. It's hard to tell what's in somebody's heart, and I certainly wouldn't put myself in that place. But like I said, the end result is a bad result, and this is the third time, and she's not doing very well with other issues regarding race. We're not hiring Black companies to do construction projects. We're not hiring Hispanic companies. We're not hiring Hispanic and Black personnel in the city of Tampa at any great numbers. We're not promoting them. We passed up a Hispanic police chief. And so at the end of the day, she's got a very bad record on race.
Patrick, let me ask you this. The the program itself, at one point, Tampa Bay Times, they're the ones that broke the story. Okay, so they broke the story in September of last year, and there it is. Tampa police called for hundreds to be evicted. Entire families lost their homes. As much as I've read and gotten up to speed on this, the crime-free program, do you see anything as to it being called crime-free first, and now the name is changed, even though the interim chief at the time, Ruben Delgado, said there's no major revamping of the program. It's a slight little tweak. Do you agree with that?
I think it's a bad program. And the reason why I think it's a bad program is because we're not doing this for every neighborhood. In other words, the mayor tried to pawn this off saying, well, we're just trying to make neighborhoods better and neighbors should know if there's danger next door. Well, if somebody's getting arrested in South Tampa in some Tony neighborhood, they're not calling all the neighbors and saying, hey, your neighbor just got arrested for drunk driving or for domestic violence or whatever. They're only doing it to poor people in low-income housing areas. They're not doing it in other areas. It was like the biking while black. Everybody who got arrested was on a bicycle and they were black. Nobody was getting arrested on Bayshore Boulevard for biking and checking their IDs and seeing if they had stolen goods on them and hoping to catch somebody in the net. And so, this is once again the same kind of a program, and it's targeted to the people that she thinks and the police think will net the biggest result.
Okay, so from my reading of all the publications, the news publications that have come out, it was within a time span of, since 2013, this program was implemented. We have 1,100 people flagged, and 90% of them are Black and poor Black. Is that correct?
According to the Times, it is. The city's disputed some of that, but the city doesn't keep good records. And the problem is that it's hard to report on this stuff when the city's slow to give you data. And then at the end of the day, they give you bad data. And so whatever mistakes were made in this article, I would tell you, was you can point right back at the city of Tampa for not keeping good data on what it's doing.
Hold on, Etulio. Patrick, the data that was put out, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure you're more up to speed with all the information regarding this issue. Am I incorrect in that the city attorney, one of the city attorney, said that there was only 8 people that had been evicted, versus the hundreds that the Tampa Bay Times reported on? And that's where I got that information from. 1,100 flagged, 90%. You're not clear on that?
I think that the city said that they only had a record of this many actually leading to an eviction. I think the Times had more information when they went and interviewed people to find out that this was more destructive than the city wanted to lead on. I don't think that anybody will ever know unless you wanted to go interview the 1,100 landlords and trace this thing back. And I think it's very difficult to do that. It's also difficult to understand the evicted versus I'm just not going to renew your lease. And so that's happening a lot where the landlord was, 3 months from the lease being over and just said, well, we're not going to renew it, or we're going to increase the price, or we're going to find some reason to get rid of you. So there's a lot of ways to kick somebody out of a house rather than just evicting them. And so I think that the issue the city was trying to come up with a fine point on was, well, this didn't lead to actual evictions, but the end result was the same. People lost their homes. And these people are kind of marked now. When you get kicked out of a place or at least not renewed, the next landlord suspects something. And so it creates a bigger problem for you down the road, down the road, down the road. It's like, arresting a kid. It just leads to more problems. Arresting these people on bikes leads to more problems. You lose your job because you got arrested. There's a lot of problems that are caused by this kind of harassment that the mayor doesn't want to take responsibility for.
Okay, so Getulio, you're gonna unmute yourself. I'm gonna mute myself. You want to weigh in as to? I asked Patrick whether he thought Jane Castor is racist. He's saying no. He can't just know what's in her heart. We do know that there's something called implicit bias. It's just a big coincidence that just like the second program now is leading to the same results. Well, we shall await the verdict from the DOJ. But what are your thoughts? Do you think she's a racist, Getulio?
Well, like if we're gonna discuss racism, um, can you see me?
Yes, sir. I can see you.
Okay, for whatever reason, I can't see myself. If we're going to discuss racism, we got to talk about the four types of racism, right? And I'm going to keep it brief because I know we have a timetable, but there's internalized racism, which is the implicit bias, inherent bias, subconscious, interpersonal racism, which is what everybody thinks when we're talking about racism. There's institutional and structural. Institutional being what's going on within a certain agency, and structural was what's going on between different agencies. So when we say that Jane Castor isn't a racist, or when Mr. Mantiega says she isn't a racist, she may not be an interpersonal racist in her dealings with people of color, but implicitly, because of the policies that she's supporting or not supporting, she's acting racist. And these policies have institutional repercussions. They have societal repercussions. So she might not be a racist interpersonally, but from the perspective of an institution, or from the perspective of somebody who creates structural policy, I think she is a racist. I think and she's acting like one. When she has the power to implement some type of rent stabilization by declaring a housing emergency, or rent anything like that, or an office of tenant advocacy, something that I'm working on. When she has the ability to do that and she refuses to acknowledge it, and her only solution is, oh, we need to build housing 2-3 years from now, and we're going to use the money that we get from the federal government to build housing 2-3 years. That's not helping Black and Hispanic people who are being evicted today.
Let me ask Patrick, there's this speculation, and I've heard it out on the street within the activist communities, just public members locally here, that Jane Castor is catering to developers. Is that a fair perspective?
I think Jane Castor is catering to the people who she thinks are going to get her reelected. The people in South Tampa, the people in downtown. This has been her base. This is where she had strong support from. She lost. She did not do well in the Black community. She's had a tougher time in the Hispanic community, and so I think she's just catering to those that helped her get elected and are going to get her elected again. In this town, developers certainly have had a easy go. They are welcomed. We actually, fund some of their projects, help them with tax breaks, and giving them some of their money back that they spend in taxes for their projects. And so certainly can't say she's anti-development.
This program, the Crime Free, which is now called Safety Awareness for Everyone, the goal, as it was said, was to combat violent crimes on the rental properties. Is that what happened, Patrick?
No, according to the St. Pete Times article, much of this was smaller crimes. It was things like possession, drunk driving, and when you start talking about violent crimes, even things like shoplifting was included. But even things like domestic violence doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a danger to your neighbor. You might be a danger to anybody in your own apartment, but that doesn't mean you're a danger to your neighbor. So this was not very well controlled, not very well monitored, and it was just, I think, really to try and put a lot of Blacks out of public housing, or out of Section 8 housing, or low-income housing, when the city felt that they were troublemakers, and they really didn't have a high standard of what a troublemaker was, except if you're arrested and you're black, you obviously must be a problem.
Let me ask you about, you mentioned, I'm curious, Patrick. I saw an interview recently of yours where Gene came on with you, and you're a Democrat, a strong Democrat. And but what was said during that interview, I think it was by Gene, that you guys are just trying to call balls and strikes. It doesn't matter what party. Why is it that you're so vocal and have been now for some time? And I don't see a lot of local Democrats being very loud about this when it's happening a second time. I don't see a lot of local Democrats. I see some of them on social media being very loud as to their pet issues, but and then I see them at the Freedom Fund and the Kennedy King and the Martin Luther King Jr. parade, but I don't see a lot of Democrats speaking out against this. And I think Martin Luther King said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Why are so many or so few Democrats really raising their voices as to what is happening? And you particularly calling out for the mayor to have reflection about what's happening here and the impact it's having on poor black people.
I think that the mayor is a very powerful person. Not a lot of people want to cross the mayor. If you have a business in this community, you're going to be doing a home improvement. If you're going to need a permit, there's 100 reasons why you don't want to cross the mayor's city of Tampa. Most people want to have good relations with the police, with the fire, which she controls. And so, a lot of people don't want to cross her. She is a Democrat. And so some people will excuse her on this. But I think that the other issue here is that a lot of the movers and shakers in this town do live in South Tampa. They do live in downtown. The areas they're living in are booming. They're not having the problems that some of us are having. I wrote a column last week about her State of the Union address, and we commented that whatever she was talking about, the city she was talking about, isn't the city I have my business in. I'm, like I said, is in Gary. And we talked about the fact that our homelessness is up. These homeless people are camping on property here. They're dumping garbage. We're even having them defecate. And I said that no matter what she says this town is, the next day when I come in, I'll probably have to deal with human feces on the front door. And what was so ironic was the next day I came in, I did have to deal with somebody who used the bathroom right at the front door of La Gaceta because they're homeless. They got no other place to do. And that's the Tampa I live in. Obviously, her Tampa is shiny, brand new. Her Tampa is the one that's all white and all white neighborhoods. And when she sees blacks, they're troublemakers and they're on bikes and they must be stealing stuff. And if they have a drunken driving, they should be kicked out of their apartment. And so it's a skewed view. And it's not that many miles between downtown and Gary. So I don't know why she can't hang out in Gary a little bit and figure out what's really going on in the city.
All right. Well, we do have some comments. I want to publish some of those. Robin Lockett. That's why I've stated the culture has already been created. They can change the name, but the results are the same. Lipstick on a pig is still a pig. On the landlord talks about eviction and that person just leaves. Who knows about this? News coverage has been sent. Okay, so I wanted to add let me do a little bit of a follow-up. You said some people who have businesses, interest there in the city, they don't want to cross her because she's very powerful. Do Democrats, because Hillsboro's blue, and so is the city of Tampa, blue, Democrat. Don't persons in office have an obligation when they see things like this, especially when they say that they represent a party that is against this? Don't they have an obligation to say something? You're a journalist. You can be crossed.
Well, they do, but you see that people who have gotten in the way of the mayor on city council have been attacked by the city, and city resources have been taken away from them. And actually, it looks like city resources have been used against them. You look at John Dingfelder, who's no longer on council. He started to point out some issues with some of the spending that we were doing. and some bad water projects and some other things. Councilman Goods has been a critic of the mayor's. Certainly was very critical of her hiring of this new police chief. And all of a sudden, the city calls up and encourages somebody to refile a complaint against him that is leading him to a lot of difficulty. And so, like I said, it's a powerful position, and a lot of people just aren't going to cash in their chips to try and help the Black community. That's what we're seeing now.
I spoke to an insider, a Democratic insider, earlier in the morning, and that person told me, I asked the same question of this person, and they said they're afraid, Haiti. They're afraid to cross her because she is perceived as a bully. Do you agree with that, Patrick?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that she's acted that way. She is using resources. I criticized DeSantis for, attacking Disney, but she's really doing the same thing for city council. And so if DeSantis is a bully and a bad guy, then the mayor's a bully and a bad girl. I mean, she is doing the same things, and yet Democrats will get very vocal about DeSantis. At the end of the day, the governor really doesn't know me. I can be negative against the governor, and I'm just way down here, and so the governor ignores me. He's got bigger fish to fry than me. But of course, the mayor's a little different story, and so I think that's why the Times has been very cautious in doing this. But Creative Loafing's gotten a lot more aggressive, and I think the Times will start to get a little bit more aggressive also.
So you know what? For the Black community, they didn't support her at her first run where she won and became mayor. Maybe Blacks should start getting away from the Democratic Party, because she just met with Biden, and I don't really hear anything about. Certainly, Biden must know that the DOJ is in Tampa investigating what could be the second round of oppression on the Black community. And so not even on the national front is anything being said. Like, this doesn't even matter.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'm a strong Democrat. I believe in my party, and that doesn't mean that I'm on the side of everybody who shares the Democratic logo. I think as a whole, when you take a look, that you'll find that Democrats are certainly a lot better when it regards working with the Black community and trying to do social safety nets and programs that are more beneficial to the Black community. I think that the Republicans have a horrible base, and Jane wasn't my cup of tea, and she wasn't other people's cup of tea. But elections have consequences, and the consequence is this is a person who won. But everybody who was running at the time was a Democrat. There wasn't really, if there was a Republican, they were pretty low down in the polling and didn't score very well. But I think almost all of them were Democrats, and so it's a Democratic town. But there's better Democrats than others, and Castor's never been somebody who's been a strong Democrat. She was a Republican for many years, which was odd because she's gay, and being a gay Republican is kind of an oxymoron when the party that party's been so anti-gay, and then so she switched parties to win, not necessarily because it was in her heart. And so what you're seeing is somebody who I think is acting like a Republican as mayor, and while she's wearing a Democratic flag.
Okay, I want to ask you this, Patrick, and I'm sorry, Hituri. I know you're co-hosting and you're hardly saying anything, but that whole 9-minute thing at the beginning with the audio kind of threw me off. Do you see a pattern with her acrimony with the media, saying, "Oh no," like what we saw Trump do, fake media. Do you see a pattern of that? I've seen that.
Absolutely. There's people who are favored. There's people who aren't favored. She acts like these things that are happening aren't happening. Tampa Bay Business Journal has basically been printing whatever press release they receive from her, and then her administration's been feeding them. Newspapers like myself, when we ask for something, we're going to wait for 2, 3, 4 weeks. the Tampa Bay Business Journal gets shipped stuff before they even ask for it. If they want them to have a document, they'll get it to them really fast. And so the mayor's picking winners and losers. She's spending a lot of money on hiring more communications people. She's got a newsletter that might as well just be directly out of her campaign. She really is investing a lot of our taxpayer dollars in her reelection platform and in her reelection staff. And at some point, I would love it if somebody would come and see if some of this stuff is criminal, but it doesn't appear anybody's going to do that, and it doesn't appear that there's a lot of high standards with the population of the city of Tampa. They're happy just to see the shiny new buildings, and they're happy to say, "Oh, well, I know the mayor, and therefore, I'm somebody." And so we end up with what we get.
Okay. You mentioned the whole piece on your column was you're urging her to reflect, and that's to be pensive, meditative about what's going on that we're witnessing. What how do we get her to do that, Patrick?
I think when she gets a subpoena, she'll start to reflect. When she has to come up with her phone records and those of her close friends and relatives, when she gets the same kind of scrutiny that she's tried to put on Dingfelder and Goods, I think she'll be reflective. I do hear some rumblings out there that there are some in the media who are starting to get ready to serve subpoenas getting ready to serve demands for phone records of people who are not in the administration but are close to the mayor. And so we'll see if that happens. If that does, it might put a lot of heat on her, and she might move from this position of just being criticized by people like myself to being scrutinized by law enforcement and the courts.
Go ahead, Tulio.
Haiti. So I have some ideas. If you want her to get reflective, it's just to remind her that there's plenty of people with footage of protesters, young protesters, 19, 18 years old, white, black, Hispanic, woman, man, non-binary, whatever you want to get into. Whole bunch of young people getting shot with tear gas. There's footage of that. I think that would make a nice campaign video. That's all I'm saying. If somebody decided to run against her and make an ad, I think that would galvanize the black community. Just saying.
Okay, well, this is what I find interesting too. When she was sworn in, the Sir and Anna Cruz, and she has her hand on the Bible, the good book. She has her hand on the Bible, and so I don't know, maybe if she actually opened it. I don't know if she does read it, but since we're talking about poor people, there are a couple of verses that came to mind. Um, Whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be heard. That's Proverbs 21:13. That's in the book that she placed her hand on, that she was sworn into office. Here's another one. He who oppresses the poor reproaches his maker, but he who honors him has mercy on the needy. Do not rob the poor because he is poor, nor oppress the afflicted at the gate, for the Lord will plead their cause and plunder the soul of those who plunder them. Maybe she should crack open that book that she put her hand on and swore that she'd serve the people. Because you know what, Patrick, as you say, it's not just she's serving a particular section of the city, South Tampa, not bothering them. She's serving those that are that find themselves in being poor. And so, Getulio, I was gonna mention, you mentioned the DUI squad, Patrick, and saying first banking while black. We know what happened with that. The DOJ said that they were burdened without a benefit. She denied before she was going to announced that she was running to be mayor and wanted the vote of the black community, and said that she had then said, "Oh, it's wrong." You also mentioned the DUI squad. Tell us a little bit about that. We have a little bit of time. that's another thing where she didn't want to take accountability. Patrick, tell the viewers a little bit about that.
So they used to reward the DUI squad for arrests. They would give them cruises if you had a lot of these arrests. And so what you were having is we had a case where there was a lawsuit, a fight between one of the radio personalities and a local. And one of the attorneys for one of the parties called the DUI sergeant, whoever led that squad, and told him, "Oh, this guy's going to be leaving. He's been drinking. You should pull him over." And this all ended up and became a big scandal of how the DUI squad was used for this personal vendetta. And after the investigation happened, it appeared that that they were doing a lot of false arrests. I had a good friend, a friend of yours, Al Fox, that was arrested because he is a gentleman who has pushed for changes in U.S. policy towards Cuba. Some Cuban American police officers here decided they'd arrest him for DUI. He blew a 0. Blood test was none. They kept him for about 12 hours, moving him back and forth through different jails. He went to sue the city for an apology. They fought him, spent $200,000 of our money defending themselves. At the end of the day, they had to write him a letter of apology because they arrested him falsely. And the guy who arrested him ended up getting kicked off the force. But during this entire time, the mayor's defending her police officers. She's defending this. She will not admit that there's a problem there. And after the fact, she has to fire everybody. And I think we had to end up losing or stopping prosecution on 100, 200 cases of DUIs because they were all tainted by this squad. And so she always defends the wrongdoers if they're connected to her because she's always protecting herself. Part of our problem with her in the Black community here is that she's not the mayor. She's still the chief cop in this town. And she really believes that Black people who are doing wrong must be bad people. And no matter what they're doing, she just thinks they're going to get worse. And I think she's jaded to the Black community from her years of serving on the police force. When she sees a young Black man on a bike with a white T-shirt, she thinks he's a drug dealer, he's stealing, whatever it is, but he isn't going to church and he isn't going to work in her mind. And this is a problem that we have, and it's continuing.
Getulio, I promise you I'm going to let you talk. I need to mention this because it's not just a Black problem. Maybe overall, they've been the ones that have been impacted. But I'm sure you can recall this, Patrick, and I'm going to allow you to maybe mention this. Jason Westcott was a young man that was killed by TPD. And after he was killed, the Tampa Bay Times did an exclusive on a confidential informer who then all of a sudden began to snitch on his handlers from TPD and said that they had caused him or kind of manipulated him for him to give information that later on he said that it was not true to get PC to be able to get a search warrant. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's another case where at the front end, Jane Castor said, this is a reliable confidential informer, very reliable. And then once he turned around and said, look, I said something that turned out to be a lie because I was kind of led to do that by my handler. And then she said, oh, no, he's a liar. You want to talk about that?
Well, I don't know a whole lot of particulars of that case or remember it, but I can tell you that it's par for the course with her. Anytime you point to her city staff, to her police force, the answer is it's all perfect. There's no problems. Don't worry about it. Then she has to face overwhelming evidence that there's a problem. And maybe this is okay if you're a police chief, but when you're mayor, you have to be that go-between. You have to find that balance between the people you're serving as mayor and your police force. You have to find the balance between the fire department and the people they're serving. You have to balance the budget and you just can't demand it all for police. You have to use some of it for social services. You have to use some of it for elderly care, for parks and rec. And what you find is a city completely out of balance. All the money gets spent downtown. It all gets spent on the Riverwalk. All the police force, when it comes to positive policing, is in South Tampa. When it comes to negative policing, it's all in East Tampa. And it's just over and over again. And the mayor just cannot step back, take a look, listen to people like you and me, and say, maybe they have a small point. Maybe there's something wrong here. Maybe I should change the way I'm operating, or bring some other people in and see what's going on. But instead, it's merely just saying that the press is wrong, the complainers are wrong, I'm right, until people have to go to jail. Then you all of a sudden say, well, I didn't know, they lied to me, I was misled. This is her staff, these are her people. And at some point in time, you have to take responsibility. The buck should stop at the mayor's office, but it never.
It's your turn, Getulio.
So yeah, I mean, from an activist perspective, people are quick to think, oh, defund the police. That's what people want to do. But when people are talking about policing and police brutality and the mistakes that police do, we're not attacking individual policemen. We understand that these people are out there doing their jobs, but the police department as an institution is hierarchical, right? And if the mayor is the top cop, as Mr. Mantiega said, which she still is, she sets the tone for policing as an institution. So what are these police like? So if it goes back to the a few bad apples. No, it's not a few bad apples. It's the barrel. The barrel's bad. And if you have the person, you have the mayor who's acting that way and setting the tone through racist policy, and not being held accountable, and not balancing her job as a mayor of all people, all the citizens, all the residents of Tampa, and the mayor of the police department, then that's what you get. We get these biking while black, we get this housing while black, we get everything's a crime while black in the city, right? So yeah, the mayor needs to be held accountable, and I pretty much agree with Mr. Mantiega and everything he's been saying thus far.
Okay, well then you, Patrick or Getulio, you should subscribe to La Gaceta.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you should.
Absolutely.
It's $35. We'll send it to your house.
Listen,
Yeah,
my dad talks up like I said that he's been talking up for 10 years.
You don't even have to get on your bike, so you don't have to worry about the police arresting you because you're Hispanic. All right.
Thank you, Patrick. It's always super fun, informative to have you on. I'm honored that you would come on. And thank you, Getulio, also for co-hosting. You're going to stay on board with me because we're going to say goodbye to Patrick, and we're going to come back on in a couple of minutes because we have slated next. Connie Burton is going to come and provide commentary to what you've said, Patrick. Anyways, we will be back shortly.